I usually like to go live a little bit early just to make sure everything's working and people can hear us and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I just hope I configured the mic correctly because I think it was capturing my webcam at first, but
It sounds fine, so I'm guessing
okay,
it's the right one, but
cool.
it's always hard to say.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we are good on YouTube. All right. I think that's pretty much everything I need to do. Sorry, it's also been a while since I've hosted an episode, so I have like a checklist of my own that I have to go through and make sure I have everything right. I was at least smart enough to make a checklist once.
Sure.
Whenever I miss something, I'm like, I need a checklist. Okay, so we've got like a minute and then we can start off and actually have the discussion. And looks like there's at least one person listening live, which will be awesome. And then, do you listen to the podcast normally?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna say normally the live version doesn't have as many listeners as the finally produced version by like a factor of like 100 at least,
Hmm.
probably larger than that. So this one, like if there's anything like if we're talking or something you don't want to be in the episode or whatever, just let me know. That's completely fine. They do record this, and I think it's on YouTube, so I don't know how that works with getting rid of that. But obviously, we don't want anything on there that you're uncomfortable with or anything like that.
Perfect.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump in then, and then we can dive into this because we don't have to wait for anybody today.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Go Time. Today, I am joined by Dominic St-Pierre, a polyglot software engineer and a huge fan of Go and Elm. Might have to edit that last bit out. We can't be advertising for Elm here. Sorry, Dominic. So, how are you doing, Dominic?
I'm doing very good. Very good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, today we're going to be talking about using Go as a blind developer. So, I hope you're ready to carry the show because I know very little about this and I'm here to learn with everybody else.
Sure.
So, I
Yeah.
guess to start off, um, for anybody who's unfamiliar with the process, how do you like actually code as a blind developer? Like, what does that process look like?
Sure. Maybe before that, I'd like to specify. When you hear the word blind, it does not really mean someone that does not have any sights at all. So I'm on the category that I do have a little bit of vision. So I like to point that out at first because it's very difficult sometimes to understand that there is multiple level of blindness, if you will.
It's a spectrum
Uh,
rather than like an on off type switch.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not a boolean for sure. So yeah. Um, so how am I developing? Well, I was lucky enough to be frank to have enough vision long time ago. So I have a degenerative disease, visual disease that uh, is fairly common, and there's not much escape for me. And sadly, in the last 2 years, I've lost a lot of my central vision. So uh, we will, you know, come back to that later. But I just want to give a little bit of background here. Um, because I'm in a transition at this moment. So I'm kind of transiting from mostly a normal way of working. Let's say 5 years from now, I was like using bigger text font and whatnot, but not really a huge difference from a normal sighted person, if I can say that. Um, so these days, I'm learning, in fact, to start working with more assistive tooling, like screen reader, and so yeah, it's not an easy transition, if I can say that. So I've always have been legally blind, but my vision is deteriorate. It's downgrading. I don't have the word, but it's getting lower and lower as I go. And yeah, so to answer the questions, well, I'm trying to work as much as I can as a normal programmer, I guess. But I started to felt huge roadblock since like 3 years ago, for example. So when I started to lose my central vision, if you will. Um, so yeah, hopefully I have not lost you already, but yeah, it's a tough one to answer first, I guess. But
No, it completely makes sense. And I think it's good for people to know that it's not always black or white, and that some people are in the situation like you are where they have to completely relearn something they've done for years at a time, which in many ways can be possibly more challenging than like being accustomed to that and then jumping into coding. Because I editor or developers struggle with changing like editors and things like that. So the fact
yeah,
that you'd have to completely change up your tool set is a huge change.
absolutely. And yeah, and it started at the OS level. So yeah, it is not an easy path at the moment for me, for sure. Especially when you're used to go fast. So uh, small things, as we would go along, small things can really slow down blind developers. And yeah, I'm learning as I go. And yeah, it's difficult because the tooling is of course not, mm, usually not really well. There's so many of us that it's very hard to have stellar tooling at the moment.
It's I saw a talk, I think it was a VS or Visual Studio talk. I think it was linked on Twitter whenever you said you would come join us.
Yeah.
Um, and just seeing that, it was kind of interesting because as somebody who's never even like, unfortunately, I've never even really thought about like how does somebody code if they can't see. And if I was developing software, that wouldn't really be the first thing I'd think about, just because it's not something you experience from day to day. But then seeing somebody do it, like it's kind of eye opening because you're like, oh, like there's a lot of things I could be doing better in whether it's a website or a software or whatever else. And you just don't think about it because it's just not your day to day type activity. So I imagine that would be, like you said, it would be hard because that might not be the first priority when they're releasing software.
Yes, exactly. We are almost just getting started to have the website that we are creating, to be as accessible as we, you know, it's not automatic for, even for creating websites. So yeah, for sure, when you're writing code, well, it's certainly not the first thing that came up. But I would guess that when you have a blind developer on your team, then it's you know it start to make sense to do the small things. I would say the most obvious would be function name. I mean, being as explicit as possible with function name is extremely helpful for blind developers. Everything that relates to navigating the code. uh, so as much as other developers can help, this is a huge difference.
So I guess this is up to you. Where would you like to start? Like, do you want to talk about some of the tools you're using, or where would you like to start with the conversation?
Well, yeah, I can talk about the tool. It's fairly simple for me. Like I was saying, I'm in a transition. So uh, not using a screen reader to using a screen reader, it is, I mean, it's the hardest thing I've done in my life, and I'm not there yet. So the video that you were referring to, take a completely blind developer, for example, which were like that since their birth, for example. uh, Compared to me, they are able to, I don't know. They are able to capture or understand the screen reader in in a speed that I just cannot. I'm not there yet. So it is extreme. I don't even know how they are doing that, and I'm blind since birth as well. But I always have a little, visual. So yeah, it's hard. So what I'm doing at this moment is that I force myself to close my screen at the moment. So I need to close my screen, and I need to, you know try, to learn to use that. So it is difficult. Um, I'm a Linux user. I've been using Linux, day to day since 2014. I was the tooling that I'm used there it is extremely performant for me. When until 3 years ago. So I'm using i3 as the tile manager. I'm not using my mouse, never, and all my window are always maximized, and I'm using the virtual desktop of i3. So it's that was very good. This way of working will not work for me in the next year or 2 years. Um, and yeah, so I'm trying to switch to a GNOME based desktop, because the only screen reader on Linux is Orca, actually. And um, yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to work. So to me, this is another very, very difficult change. Accepting to leave my very comfortable zone. Um, so yeah, I do have a reverse color. Um, oh, I'm sorry, I don't remember the so the X render on Linux. You can just reverse all colors. So this is extremely useful when you have a little bit of vision. Sometimes white background can be extremely difficult on your eyes. Uh, so that's the tooling I'm using. So basically, I'm transitioning to being full time using a screen reader. But yeah, this is extremely challenging.
Which editor are you using then?
VS Code.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you imagine there'll be a day where possibly you have to switch to a different operating system? I personally don't know how good the tooling is in Linux versus like Windows versus like Mac. I don't really know, but I'd imagine that, like you were saying, transitioning just to GNOME is already like a challenge. And I could, I guess, potentially see a case where if some operating system just supports things better, you're stuck switching to something that's completely foreign in that sense.
Yeah, that and I mean, frankly don't want to use Windows, and I would not really want to use a Mac. But yeah, I do have a Windows machine, which I'm using to train myself on a screen reader. I'm using NVDA. This is a screen reader on Windows. This is working very fine. So it's not the accessibility tooling that I have a problem with switching OS. So, but yeah, VoiceOver on Mac seems to be very nice as well. But yeah, this is something I really have to take a decision quick. You know, I was even starting to think, well, I should maybe try to contribute to Orca on Linux and try to make it better. You know, try to make it so I can continue to work on Linux, because I would be very sad, frankly, to leave. But it's a possibilities. It's been like that for all my life. I stopped doing things that I love to do because I cannot I don't see enough anymore. So that's part of my life. It's the way it is.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that's a tough thing to both accept and experience the transition of. So
Yep.
when it comes to programming, then, like you said that you're a polyglot software engineer. So I guess my next question is, are you trying to stick with certain languages as you're learning these tools, or are you trying to learn techniques that apply to everything, or like what is that process like?
Yeah. So I'm mostly doing Go for the last 6 or 7 years. Uh, I would I'm not sure how to answer that. So I'm doing consulting, so my work requires me to work on lots of different languages and stacks and whatnot. This might be something for example, doing front end at this moment. I'm not sure I will be able to do that anymore because it's well just because it's very hard to build beautiful front end application when you don't really see the end result and whatnot. Um, so I'm transitioning towards a backend language that will allow me to make sure that once I do run full time on a screen reader, which is very soon for me, um, I will not have any issue. So I have tried lots of different backend language in the last 10 years, and yeah, I have a lot to say about lots of them because it's very different from a blind developer, and it's just those small things that makes a language more usable on a screen reader or not.
One thing I'd like to add is that I think what might happen is that you might have a different opinion as to what makes a beautiful UI in the future, which is going to be a very different from how other people see it, but it's also like a good to have a different perspective sometimes. And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
who knows? There might be a time where you could be the specialist in helping people make it actually accessible and great for a great blind experience versus everybody's always focusing on things looking pretty versus being functional.
yeah. The good old time when everything was text based. That is the world. This is where we should go. It was nice.
I
Yeah,
mean, it kind of reminds me of I don't know if you've looked at remixes, something kind of new in the React world, and one of the big things that they pitch is that essentially that with all the JavaScript stuff, it's kind of led to web pages that break traditional functionality. And that was like one of their big goals in creating it was that they want to allow people to make incremental changes to like take something that's basically just a regular HTML page and incrementally improve it without ruining the experience. And they gave some examples of it, but it's cool to see people focusing on that idea of let's not ruin the user experience that needs to be there for some reason. And in some ways that has happened on this desire to like make everything uh I don't even know the right word for it, like sort of like those real-time snappy JavaScript pages.
yeah,
So
y-
you said that you have a lot of opinions about the languages and the backend languages. So you're using Go.
yeah,
From what I gather, you like Go as a language. So can you talk a little bit more about what makes Go an accessible language for you?
yeah, yeah. So for me, the reason number one would be the way packages are separated. So just by forcing the usage of the package name before a function, this is extremely easier for a blind developer. Like I was saying earlier, navigation is the enemy here, and knowing very quickly where this function is declared or implemented, this is huge. Take for example, I was a C# developer in a previous life, so my beginning my career started in .NET, and you can import a namespace in there, and uh, you just use functions, and you always uh, we don't really have an easy way to mouse over something and just see what's the namespace of that thing is. So uh, just having that clearly stated in Go, this is extremely useful. I
So
would say,
I
well,
take
yeah,
it that
go ahead.
means that's a good reason not to use. Is it the period import in Go?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So it's just one more reason not to use that. I know it's not really encouraged in Go anyway. I think the only place I've actually seen it is in like testing frameworks, maybe. But that's it is good to know that that's one more reason why it's not necessarily a good thing to be using.
Yes, well, it's for blind developer at least, so that's
I would
maybe
almost
not.
argue for every developer, but
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, um, So yeah, one other thing. Well, of course, Godoc. So on the terminal, Godoc, just just having to look at what a function wants in its parameter and what it is returning. It's very nice when it's strange because I can compare both world now because when you see your screen very well, then yes, VS Code or any editor will provide you a visual indication. Then well, this function accept a s as a string, for example. But sometimes the screen reader are not picking those, or they are not speaking the return type. Never. And it's very hard. So this is a good thing. Godoc is extremely useful. So you just go to your terminal, and your screen reader will have no issues whatsoever reading everything that the developer that wrote that function wanted you to do. So this is major. Uh, uh, that brings me let me brings me to a downside as well, while we are here. Small one letter variable name in Go is it is hard for screen reader as well, and for the blind developer in general, because especially when your rate is speaking very fast. um you are missing those. We always use s as string, or v as interface, and whatnot in Go, and those are difficult.
Yeah, I
That's a
can
downside.
like I can't even relate to I can't relate exactly, but I listen to audiobooks on like 2x speed, and that's something that took me a while to get to that speed. And it depends on the narrator and a bunch of other aspects, but over several years of listening to audiobooks, I just gradually slowly increased the speed. But I can definitely say there are still times where certain words or phrases, for whatever reason, I have to like go back and slow it down because I can listen to it 4 times at 2x speed, and for whatever reason that sentence I cannot understand, but every other thing in the book is completely fine. So I could imagine there's certain variables and things like that that when they're thrown in there, it's almost like they're too short or something that they just get skimmed over, and it's like really hard to comprehend them at that time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's a downside. But yeah, it's all the tooling, of course. So the fact that everything is very easy on the command line makes it very very nice. One major aspect I would say as well is when you try to go build something, and let's say you have, I don't know, 500 errors. It will not spit out all of those errors, and this is major because you have to understand that a screen reader is a one line. uh, it's a one line thing. So it's very very hard to navigate as well on the terminal. So I don't know if it's blocks at 10 or something like that, but yeah, this is something that is appreciated. So just showing less error at the same time, it's
How does
helpful.
that work for things like tests? If you're running tests and several of them are failing, or you know how like sometimes you'll just get like a pass, which is nice, and then other times you'll get like a lot more output, it feels like.
Yeah. So I would say that I'm using most often the dash run, and using a subset of tests at once. So especially when something is wrong. Um, so yeah, the multiple outputs is an issue, and yes, this is a problem. But sometimes you don't have a choice. So you just don't have a choice. So you can output that into a text file, and try to make sense of that in a more comfortable way. So that's different. So this is where blind people would lost precious minutes compared to sighted developer, for sure.
Do you think there's anything that you could be improved in that sense? Like, I guess in my mind, I'm wondering if there's a way to either like summarize or like you almost summarize and say like 8 tests failed, like you know what I mean, like something
Yeah,
along those lines.
yeah, exactly. And maybe cherry pick exactly what you want to, what information you want to have. This would be great. So I don't know. It's a tricky question, but
I I, I
yeah,
understand. That's even thinking about it now, it's not something I'm experiencing, but at the same time, I could easily see how complicated and challenging that would be, and I'm sure I'm missing like a lot of nuance that you're experiencing that I'm not.
yeah. It's hard for me to answer as well because everything. Well, at the same time, the Go team cannot do too much changes to accommodate. So that will need to be third party or and whatnot. So yeah, it's and at that time it's a question of preferences. Uh, so yeah, maybe yeah, it's a tough one.
I definitely it's interesting because you like talking about this makes me feel like there's probably a world of tools that could be built around like making that experience better, but it it unfortunately probably needs somebody who is experiencing those pains to actually understand and know what to build. Because I call me crazy, but I suspect that most developers aren't willing to learn how to use a screen reader simply to experience that, or that would be a
Oh,
very like you'd be very dedicated to do that.
yeah, it's yeah, I would guess not because frankly it is not fun. So I mean, but yeah, this is something I see myself doing in the future. So I've always have a couple of open source project myself here and there. This is certain, I will not have any choice but to build what I will need to continue working. I love to program. I will not stop doing that. So it's yeah, I will do it. So that's why I was also saying that if I have to, well, I will contribute to Orca and try to make it work on a Linux distribution. So yeah.
So, are there other things in Go that make, or really in any language that you've seen, like are there what types of things should developers be looking out for if they're designing a language or improving like working on a programming language? What types of things have you seen so far that make it more challenging?
Yeah, I can tell that any let's pick on Elixir a little bit here. Um, so I love it, by the way. I'm a huge fan, but there is some things there that is very hard for a blind person. The symbol. So let's talk about symbol. So this is why Go is also very great because you don't really have much symbol. Other than the channel and I cannot really think about anything else. Even the generics that are coming, well, they are still on square bracket if I'm not mistaken. Um, but symbols like let's say equal and greater than, and lots of I was talking about Elixir. So you have like not label, but atom or whatever they are calling that in their
Is
in
that
their
the
maps.
is that the thing like in Ruby where you put a colon before?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And also that, and there's like two or three ways to do that. So this is extremely difficult because well, yeah, those small subtleties for a normal for a person that see well, those are huge. The symbols are very very hard. So that's why as well in Python, due to the spaces that delimits the block, this is extremely extremely hard. Even with the text editor doing a nice job. Um, but yeah, yes, symbols are difficult to work with at a reasonable speed.
So, related to that, in Go, the fact that uppercase letters and lowercase letters actually have significance, is that something that's proved to be challenging? Or like how do you approach that?
Yeah, no, it's not bad. Well, for me at least, because I do have my screen reader telling that to me, so that's great. Um, I prefer that than having, let's say, modifier like private, public, protected, or sealed, or whatever the flavor. So I would say as well, not being an object oriented language is also helpful. And let me explain, because I mean it's a huge claim probably, but um, this hierarchy of object in C sharp and Java that we don't really have unless you do composing in Go. Uh, I mean, yeah, we are returning to navigation as well. So yeah, the structure of all those objects is kind of difficult to navigate, to be frank, to understand, what is going on in that, because it's very quick for you to switch file. Let's say you're moving from one package to another, and you're returning, and visually you are quickly, rapidly re-understanding, if that's a word, where you were when you left, and this is not really easy with a screen reader. You always need to recheck your surrounding. Again, a screen reader is a one line thing, so let's say your cursor is on line 13, then you just have the context of that line. So let's say you have return empty string on Go. So I mean, where are you? What's that function? Where I was? Let's say. So yeah, having a structure and not having object and inheritance, in my opinion, I mean, it's helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I completely get what you're saying. Where like if you jump from like line 13 to line 50, visually, I think we kind of just take for granted the fact that you see the function, definition above it a couple lines. But like you said, if it's a screen reader that's just reading the line you're on, it's not going to give you that context, and it wouldn't know to do it. So it's kind of like at least I suspect you'd have to spend a little bit of time figuring out like what function am I in and what is going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be a VS Code extension that I will probably want to write myself. So just hit a keystroke, and it probably exists. I honestly did not check, but yeah, it should speak out in which function you are in. That would be helpful for sure.
I know that I'm assuming there's something to collapse functions. So I'm kind of curious, like you would think that would I would almost think that would be helpful in the sense that it knows where that function is starting, if that makes sense. So it should have the context to sort of figure out like this is
Yeah,
what this is.
yeah, I think so. I think so. I hope so. In fact, but yeah, I will check.
So another question I have is with features like generics coming out, which arguably are going to make the language more confusing, at least if you're looking at code with generics in it. Is that something that concerns you? And I say this as somebody who, when I'm reading generic code, it is not always clear to me. Like I have to take like most Go code, I can just skim over it and be like, okay, cool, I know what this is doing. But generics, I like have to take a double take and be like, now what's that type again? And like it takes a little bit more. And I can only imagine in your case, having that read out loud would be like there's just a lot to consume in one line of like basically saying the type and that it's this type. And does that make sense? Is that something that
Yeah.
concerns you, or are you hopeful that you'll just be consuming generics rather than writing code with it?
Yeah, it's a small concern, I would say. I've looked at generics and Go, and they appears to be digestible, but I frankly haven't tried them with a screen reader yet, so I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what. But yeah, it seems to be. Uh, I'm also used to generic, so I mean, mm, yeah, no, they aren't. It does not appears to be that hard from
It's
a screen reader point of view.
I was gonna say, if you're using a lot of languages, that probably helps. I think one of the things that forces me to do a double take on generics is that I haven't used them in quite a while. Like I use them a lot in Java because you pretty much have to in Java, I feel like. But since then, I have not really touched them, and it's been a while since I've used Java. So it's one of those things where I'm hoping that familiarity and seeing them more frequently makes it easier to read them and comprehend them. Otherwise, it's going to slow me down some too, which I think is an okay trade-off for some of the stuff, but hopefully they don't get used everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, one aspect is that, it brings that one letter word, if you will, that I would expect lots of people would use probably T.
Hmm.
And yeah, and the fact that is capitalized as well. So the screen reader will say, capital T at each time. So but I prefer that. I'm grateful that it is capitalized as well. So that's something that I think will well, if my memory is correct, they are capitalized. So not
I think most
I
people have capitalized them in the examples I've seen. I
okay.
can't imagine it's required, but it just seemed like a one of those things that just sort of carried over from other languages.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a doubt now. I remember having seen an LM for a slice hole, and I think it was lowercase.
Say
Yeah,
I
that will be that will be a challenge for sure. Maybe I will change my point of view. It will probably be difficult.
you've got me curious now because I haven't like I think there was a proposed package for Go maybe 1.18, maybe 1.19. I don't remember which one it was being proposed for, but it was a package with what slice operations that was
Yeah,
meant to go in the standard library. But I didn't actually look at the code too much to see what all was there and like how it was what the code looked like. So I'll have to check that out at some point.
yeah. I think the LM was lowercase, but I could be wrong.
So
It was
my
on the
next
web, so
question
yeah.
is more about other people you're working with. You'd mentioned like the single letter variables. Are there other things that developers do that make your life better or worse? Or I guess some of the times it might be yourself in the past. Have you found yourself looking at code you wrote in the past and being angry at yourself?
Oh, yeah, of course, but yeah. I mean, I think commenting is overrated. Probably, a good comment is still very helpful. So we tend as developers, I think, to not really comment, especially in Go because it's so verbose. It's so uh it's so clear what it is doing, but a comment line explaining what's going on is you know can save like 2 minutes for a blind developers because now you don't have to scroll down five line for a four that is resorting something or whatever it is doing. But so so yeah, commenting is extremely helpful for us. um Nothing really. Well, pair programming. I mean, this is like a complete topic. It's super hard, for a person to follow of course, someone that sees well. Um, and when you're driving, it's often very difficult because the other party, you know, does not really understand why it is so long at this place, and it's just a line or whatever the reason. So yeah, pair programming is very very difficult.
It
And I,
it almost feels like if you had the audio one on your end, like if I was pair programming with you and you had the audio one, I'd, I'm guessing that's not normally the case because normally the audio in your own computer doesn't get pushed through video or anything like that. But if it was there, I suspect that would be enlightening. Like not like how do I put this? It would be useful in the sense that it would help open up people's eyes as to what you're experiencing. And then I think they'd be a lot easier to be understanding and empathetic about it. But I agree with you that before then, you might be sitting there like, why is this person sitting on this line? I don't know what's going on. And meanwhile, you're trying to listen to the screen reader to understand, what's going on in this line. And that's very different from, visually looking at it.
yeah, yeah.
But
Maybe one tip, if I can, if you ever do anything, even if it's not pair programming, but just talking about code with a blind person, just say the line number. I mean, don't say find this function. No, no, no. Just say, well, it's in the main.go at line 150. So that is how you indicate to a blind person where to go exactly, very fast. So line number is
It's the worst part is as developers, we know how valuable that is when we're looking at like broken tests or compiler errors. But I agree with you that it's not something that we think to say, despite the information being readily available, which is not something we generally think to say when we're communicating like verbally with somebody.
Yeah.
I had another question and I forget what it was. um, so I guess the next thing I'd want to ask is, what other languages have you tried? You know, going into this with the screen reader and those sort of tooling. You mentioned Go. Are there some others that you've given a shot to see how they were and how they compared?
Oh yeah. So yeah, I'm still doing consulting in .NET C Sharp. So it's okay ish, but yeah, for there's a lots of things. Well, first of all, there's so many Windows dialog and whatnot that come with .NET. It's not really the language per se. It's more like the framework or Visual Studio in itself. Um, I know there is Visual Studio Speak, which I have not tested yet. It seems to be like a screen reader only built by the Visual Studio team, which is very very nice. I mean, it's a great initiative, but I did not have the time to test it. But yeah, um, so Elm is great because for the compiler, the compiler is just your copilot really, and I'm not talking about GitHub Copilot here, which is not good to. Anyways, that's another story. But yeah, the Elm compiler is great because, well, first of all, when you are on your website, your web app, whatever, you just have one error at once on the web UI. On the terminal, it's a little bit different. They are showing lots of error, but yeah, on the web page, it's pretty clear. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'm trying to think about the tooling. So when you are creating CLI, for example, well, this might not be for blind user, but let's say for me 5 years ago, using colors could be, well, it should be optional. So I mean, I was a very low visual person 5 years ago, and any green, any light colors were very hard for me to see. Uh, so yeah, that's a small things for. But yeah, it's difficult. I don't know how to answer that, frankly. Um, the the command line is really helpful, and well, it might be a preference thing as well. So I'm not, I cannot speak for everyone, obviously. I talked with when I was starting to really lose lots of vision 2 years ago. I talked with a PHP programmer that worked at booking.com, actually, which is completely blind, and he was trying to convince me to switch to Emacs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, uh, to take Darth Vader words, it's too late for me. I mean, I cannot do that. Um, so I'm not sure at this point if I'm having my baggage of 20 years of development that kind of is difficult to change. So that might be why I think I'm saying that C sharp is harder than Go, for example, as a blind developer. So, but yeah, I really feel that um, yeah, the object oriented languages feels a little bit harder to navigate, for sure. And all those keywords that you need to predicted seal and whatnot. So all the visibility for a class or a function is it really adds lots of noise uh, in all sense of the words. Screen reader in code wise, I think. So those are very hard because yeah, you have to you have to rely on having to return to the function, trying to see, oh yeah, what it was exactly, what's going on in here. um yeah. So
You mentioned earlier when we were talking that it's now like it's a slower process. So it's not one where you can, it basically just takes more time to go through stuff and to write certain code. So with that in mind, do you find yourself taking more time and thinking things through a little bit more ahead of time, or do you find yourself planning what you're going to do a little bit more than what you used to?
yes, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. The biggest difference is that I'm not reusing the IntelliSense or code suggestion as much now. Those are not very hard to use, but not as easy as when you are seeing exactly what you are doing. So let's say you're writing a web handler in Go, for example. So I mean, you type http dot request, and usually I was doing tab very fast 5 years ago because I was directly on the right thing. Now I need to wait a little bit, listen to what the screen reader is saying, and wow, what he says. So you need to jump one element above to try to see, well, am I on the right thing? So you um you have to recheck almost everything that you are typing, in fact. So this is the flow. So let's continue with this Go web handler. uh, so once you do r space http dot request, for example, so you you just return one word, and you make sure, well, did did I type request or or not? And yeah, so those small things compared to, it takes like what, 1 or 2 seconds to write this normally. So yeah, it's those things. So yeah, I think test driven development will probably finally be something I should start to do, because I really see the value of having the compiler really being my sighted friend, if you will. So this is where I will be certain that I'm not doing not newbie mistake, but I'm not doing, I don't know, blind mistake, or I don't know how to say that. I'm not doing like easy mistakes to miss when you're not seeing, because it's very hard. It's very hard to see
Well, I think it's
where.
worth like just like, or saying, I guess, that what is easy for one person is not necessarily easy for somebody else, because I'm sitting here in my head thinking like I have typos or I swap two letters all the time. And if you couldn't see it visually, that I don't, it'd be very hard to check that real quickly. And I imagine that if I was closing my eyes and typing, I'd have to be much more, like, a little bit slower in typing and a little bit more certain that I was typing it correctly versus, when you can see, you can just kind of throw some code there real quickly. And if it's wrong, you'll see it and you'll just quickly take the suggestion it gives you and move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and often your code editor should do a small red line under something that is not. So we don't have that on the screen reader. That there's no notifier for that. Uh, so yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, yeah, I would say, just anyone that wants to really understand a little bit what it is, yeah, close your eyes and don't cheat and write an email, for example. You will see that it is extremely difficult. So yeah, you have to, but the tooling is great because a screen reader, you can read the previous word, the previous sentence, the the line above, the line on top and whatnot. So without the cursor having to change the line. I don't know if I'm clear here, but you can move a virtual cursor, if you will, on the screen without you really moving. So the editing cursor. So that takes a little bit of time to get used to, because yeah, strange.
I mean, it's also just learning a whole new set of keyboard like you said, you don't like to use the mouse, and I'm assuming using the mouse is even harder if you can't see, or if not impossible. So I would imagine at that point it's learning in a whole new set of keyboard shortcuts to go along with all the other ones that you already use.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot, and we haven't talked about web. So I mean, navigating a web page is probably harder than navigating code, because in VS Code you do Control P and you go to your Go file and whatnot. So I would let me explain what my problem is visually. So I always add only 2% of field of vision. So let's say a standard person has a 150 field of vision. So I add a 2% of that. So when I looked at my screen, I was seeing like only 2 letters at a time. So I'm kind of used a little bit to just see a small tiny portion of my screen. So I'm not really using a mouse for a long time, I would say. You know so yeah, it's a difficult transition, but yeah, I mean, it's not completely different for me. um but yeah, it's still a huge change.
So when you're actually visiting websites and going through there, I what does that process look like, I guess? Because I have gone to a website and kind of like you can hit tab and kind of go through links, and there's like some things that I know that I can do if I like just don't have my mouse with me, or something like that. But I can't imagine like what the process is like. Are you using like page down or something like that to read through it, or what does that look like?
Yeah, there's tools in the browser. Well, not in the browser, but in the screen reader, that allow you to navigate quickly by H tag. So H1, H2, H3. So that's the first thing. Then you kind of use your arrow key to continue in that paragraph. Let's say you are at the right H1, for example, or H2. There's also shortcut to quickly have all the links very very quickly all the links in the page that you have, let's say in a list box, or I don't know what it is, a list of some sort. So you can scroll that very quick, just click any links. It's hard because let's say you are on the phone, and someone say, "I'll go click on that thing." So I mean, it's like we were saying for pair programming. It's navigating is really what makes things difficult. So that's what I was. I used links for a long time when I was younger, to navigate website before the JavaScript single page whatever. And that was great. That was very very easy for me at that time, but it's not possible anymore. There's too much JavaScript everywhere, and those tools are not capable of interpreting that. So um, you know that's a little complaint I have. The new doc site for Go, the Go.dev, I think before it was godoc.org.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was easier. It was just easier before,
I
sadly.
mean, that's hopefully somebody on the Go team listens and hears that, because I'm sure that wasn't their intent to make things harder.
No,
But
no, no. I'm sure.
and now that they know that, maybe it's something they can put more attention into, is like, how can we make this more accessible?
Sure.
So we are getting near the end of the hour. So do you have an unpopular opinion you'd like to share?
Oh wow. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I go technical or not, or non-technical, but let's go non-technical, because I
All right. Do you
and
mind
I
if I play the intro song to lead us into
oh
it first?
yeah, sure.
I actually think you should probably leave.
All right, Dominic, it's time for you to share your unpopular opinion,
All
and
right.
then we'll post it on Twitter. People will vote. And as Matt says, if it's not unpopular, you have to come back on the show. That's your
Okay.
punishment.
Yeah, I hope I will not have a problem for that. But to me, the educational system is killing the creativity of our children. Period.
Do you want to elaborate?
Well, yeah, sure. We did the homeschool. Well, I'm talking more about my region here, so I'm not talking about the world in the entirety of the world. So we are living in Quebec, Canada, and in here, well, yeah, there's not enough money that the government is injecting in the education system, and yeah, we did homeschool. You know, all our lives with our children, and because we were feeling that they were going to not be, their enthusiasts. Oh, I don't know how to say that word. The enthusiastic idea of children are not very push forward in the current system, from my opinion. Well, it's, yeah, it's something like that.
Do you feel like it's changed? Do you feel like it was that way when you were in school, or do you think it's more of a more recent change?
Oh, that's a good question. I know I hated going there. I know I was, I was not having fun at all. And to be frank, I'm a huge entrepreneur as well. So yeah, so to me, having the liberty of expression and whatnot is very important. And to be frank, I mean, being stuck 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day in a class, especially here in Quebec. So there is some school that don't even have window. The quality of the air in the schools are in question at the moment in Quebec. I mean, we don't have a great educational system in here. That's sad. And I'm sad for the teachers as well, because they don't, they it's not them, it's the government. It's all the, yeah. So I
I
don't
think
know
most of
how it
us,
is in the US, but yeah, in here it's hard.
I was going to say, in the US at least, I can say that most teachers don't get into it for like basically they love teaching kids and helping them grow, and they don't get into it for the money because there's not any money in
Yeah.
teaching.
Yeah.
So, like you said, I think most teachers have the right incentives most of the time, but unfortunately, they're kind of limited with resources. Our daughter's not in school yet, so I like haven't experienced it firsthand, but it is something that concerns me and something I talk with my wife about is like, does homeschooling make sense part of the time? And it's also hard for me because personally, when I was in school, I feel like I got lucky, and like our school had a gifted program, and I somehow got into it in like first grade. And like basically that was really rare. And for the most part, as I've learned this later, most of the kids who got into the gifted program were teachers or children. It was rarely other kids in the school.
Yeah.
So like it opened the door and allowed me to experiment with other stuff, because basically one day every like 2 weeks I would go to a completely separate class with other kids who were supposed to be in this gifted program, and we do things like logic puzzles. That's where I was first introduced to programming with basic, and like a bunch of things that really shaped my life. But there's probably a bunch of kids who deserve to be in a program like that, who like would have thrived with something like that, but they just didn't get the chance. And like seeing that now, I'm like, well, that really sucks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I hear you. This is the same for sport. After school sport. Uh, you know, they they should be they, they they should be open to everyone. I mean, they, yeah, it's sad to see a kid that the don't really have the money to do that, cannot do that because of the money aspect. So the government should inject way more money into the education system.
It's in the US at least, after school sports tend, well, I guess it depends on the sport. There are some sports that are harder, but like things like soccer and football and a lot of those things, usually the school, at least where I live, the schools do fundraiser type things to provide, and like essentially a kid can go play football without any money or whatsoever. They'll just like the football team and other things will do fundraisers to try to help produce funds for that sort of stuff. But I've also heard not my local school, but there's another school in the area that has a mountain biking team. They do like mountain bike racing, and it's not like officially a state sponsored sport. It's like a third party, some other affiliate that's doing it. And I don't know how familiar you are with biking, but generally mountain biking is not a cheap sport to get into by any stretch. So as a result, it's unfortunately a sport that it's mostly kids who have money who can do it, and it's hard for other kids to get into it. So I know there's some people in the area who try to donate like bikes and things like that to make it more accessible for them, but it is a trickier thing where it's trying to figure out how do we get people into this, because cycling is one of those things that's really healthy for you, and it's something you don't need a whole team like, soccer, football, you need a whole team to go do, whereas cycling is
Yeah,
something somebody can do the rest of their life to stay in shape, which is better for everybody. So it's kind of it's like a tough it is a tough
yeah.
problem, I think.
And that could be a huge difference for a certain child to have access to that or not. So that, you know, that could be the difference that they need to just continue forward instead of quitting schools at some point.
So we
Yeah,
have somebody in the Go Time FM chat saying that they think this is going to be a popular opinion. You aren't going to be unpopular enough. You're going to have to join us again.
nice. So yeah, hopefully next time it will be for my Go knowledge instead of my
Oh, we can definitely
physical
talk about
condition.
some Go knowledge at some point. I didn't mean to seem like the only reason we wanted you on here was
Oh no
because
no
of
no.
the blind aspect. It was more of one of those that I have never talked with somebody who codes and Go who's blind, and it's in my mind it's a great opportunity to learn something that otherwise we would have never thought about or heard. And that's also why I think everybody listening would enjoy this episode. Is it's not it's something that I think people want to be more like knowledgeable about, so they can try to be a little bit more helpful if they can. But at the same time, it's really hard to know what is even useful or not. Like you saying short variable names is not something I would have thought about until you said it. But now that you
Yeah
say it, I'm like, oh, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like I didn't think about that.
yeah sure. Underscore are to be banned as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the underscore is a tricky one. That's I'm definitely I I think the only time I typically tend to see it in my own code is whenever I'm like temporarily just taking a variable and making it so it's not giving me a compiler error, or when I'm basically importing a SQL driver of some sort. Those
Yeah.
seem to be the two cases.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I'm not talking about the underscore to ignore an error
Oh,
or something like that. Yeah, I'm talking in the function name or
oh,
variable name. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I've seen them in some tests before, but I don't remember why off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'll have
Same
to go
here.
back and look.
Maybe it's more easy to see because test name. Well, test name, that's another thing. I mean, test name tends to be extremely long, so there there's a right amount of you know length to have. If it's too long, it's very hard as well. So yeah.
You don't like a 200 character function name?
Yeah. No, not really. It's yeah.
I can understand that. All right, Dominic, thank you for joining us. It was
Thank
great to hear your perspective and learn more about this. I am.
thank
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we end up the episode?
no. No, no, no. That's fine. Thank you very much for having me. This is great and I hope to return at some point.
Definitely. So thank you
Cool.
everybody for listening. I think this is the first episode I've done where I've actually remembered to use all three of the different little theme songs.
Nice. Was
Usually I
yours
forget
king?
about it, and then somebody has to insert it later. I think they still insert it later, but I
How,
am.
how do you start those? Is it built in Riverside?
Yeah, on my side at least, I have like a little media tab that has like a soundboard that's built in,
Nice.
which is really nice because we are still live, just so you know. Just
Oops.
want to make sure that's
Okay.
you're fine. I'm just trying to make sure you know, because
Okay.
sometimes it's like not always clear that we are still like
Yeah,
technically live.
thanks.
Um, no, like we used to do, what was it? Zoom, and then I would like set up my audio so that like it would play like QuickTime stuff through my mic, essentially using like virtual devices. Well, the issue you'd run into is that even if you tried to turn it off, Zoom would try to like adjust your volume based on what was coming through the mic. So I would play a sound clip, and then for the next like 2 minutes, my audio is super soft and nobody could hear me. And then I had to like wait for it to normalize again. And then I'd play another clip later. And eventually I was just at the point where I'm like, it's not even worth doing these right now because
Yeah.
it makes it too hard.
Yeah.
I think the only fix I ever managed to sort of work was I think I got 2 Zoom clients spun up at the same time and kind of changed the mic input device on each one. But it was just a lot of effort for something that, 30-second audio clips. It's just like, is this really worth the effort that we're putting into here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially because the production version didn't use those clips. It used, actual high quality ones versus that.
Interesting.
So, you said that you're using VS Code. How long have you been using VS Code?
Oh, since the beginning. So yeah, I never jumped in Vim or Emacs, sadly, and I regret that today. But yeah,
Vim's one of those things that I used to use Emacs a little bit. Like I was never a real Emacs user. It was one of those like if I happened to be somewhere and there was no editor, I could use Emacs and I could kind of get by, but I basically used it like a text editor, not as anything else. Um, and I've considered learning Vim at times, but it's always just one of those things where I know mentally it's going to be like a pretty big learning curve, and just trying to find that time in your life where you're like, I've got 3 weeks or 3 months or however long it's going to be that I'm going to be less productive.
yeah,
And I'm guessing you have a similar experience with using the screen reader and stuff. It's you need to learn it, but at the same time, it's finding that time where you want to be less productive is like that doesn't exist.
yeah. Oh yeah, it's difficult, but yeah, sometimes you don't have a choice. But yeah, same here for Vim. I mean, it's something I wanted to do, and I also tried the Vim key binding at some point in VS Code, but no. I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know Johnny Borsico. I'm pretty sure he loves to use that, but I've just never somehow I've never gotten around to trying it. I should at some point, but it is kind of interesting because I have a couple friends who are big Vim users, and like when I'll sit down and have a conversation with them, they'll be like, "Well, how would you do if you wanted to do this?" And like basically we sat down and had like an honest conversation, not like you should use Vim, it's better. It was more like, how would you tackle this problem? And it was interesting that we could both achieve similar speed, but it was just in completely different ways.
Yeah.
Where like they might write some, some little like I don't know if it's a function or what to do something real quick. Whereas like I could just use multi-select and kind of hack something together real quickly. And it wasn't always pretty, but a lot of the times you could figure something out that worked, when you're bulk editing or doing something like that. So I do think VS Code is like it's kind of impressive how accessible it is while still being a pretty strong power to like it's good for power users too.
Yeah. Oh
Which
yeah.
actually I never even got to ask. Can you use multi-select? Like how does that work with a
It's
screen reader?
no, yeah, well, yeah, no, it's it's out of reach. Yeah, because
That
the well, you can for editing if you are sure of what you really want to
if
do,
you're
but
positive that it's not going to break
yeah, but
everything.
you still need to validate. But yeah, it's for small things I use that, but yeah, most often than not, it's
I suspect you were saying about like autocomplete too. I imagine that's one of those things that over time you'll get better with, at least the common ones, knowing, oh, if I type REQ or something, that it's going to autocomplete at that point. Assuming VS Code doesn't suddenly change on you. If they change on you, then I could see you cursing under your
yeah.
breath at VS Code for a little bit.
Yeah. That's another aspect. Any software changes is yeah, it's hard. But yeah, the autocomplete is very good. So yeah, VS the Go VS Code extension. I mean, yeah, I forgot about that, but yeah, that's another one that is wow, a major plus. I don't
You
know.
mentioned Copilot, like you said, not GitHub Copilot. Have you tried that
Yeah,
then?
no, I didn't know it. Well,
Okay.
well, yeah, but it's not for accessibility reason. I mean, I'm just not attracted to that. I I just like to write my own stuff and search what and also I think it would be difficult because I think first of all that they are using kind of like placeholder or something like that for I'm not sure it would work with the screen reader at all. And yeah, I don't want anyone else than me to write the code on the line that I'm currently because I mean it's already difficult me typing. I mean I no I cannot use that.
I tried it briefly, and it was while I was doing like a screencast, and it's really cool in some cases, but I also found that sometimes, at least in that particular case, you don't always want it like suggesting, like 4 or 5, like eight. Sometimes it was like 8 lines of code it's suggesting, which weren't a bad suggestion. Like a lot of times they were pretty good, but when you're trying to teach or do anything like that, I very quickly had to shut it off because I'm just like, this is too distracting. Like it suddenly has a bunch of code on the screen, and people are gonna be like,
Yeah,
where'd that come from? Like, what's going on here?
yeah,
And when you've done it for a while, it makes a little bit more sense, and you're like, okay, cool. Especially for um, like what's a good example? Like if you have a struct and you're trying to like declare an instance of that struct, and like you're clearly going to set a lot of the fields, it can sometimes like quickly sort of auto populate something you can go through, and that can be great. But at the same time, when somebody doesn't, like, they're newer to coding or something and you're trying to teach them, I was just like, oh, this is a terrible tool to have on right now. I need to shut this off.
yeah,
So I
sure.
haven't gotten to use it very much.
Yeah. Yeah, for yeah, Go can be extremely verbose as well in the database, the RDBMS world. So, but I normally use VS Code snippet in fact to do the boring stuff for me. So I prefer to control what I'm
What
inputting
you're
because
getting?
yeah, otherwise you double your work. You have to review all. Let's those 8 lines will need to yeah to get their own review. So it's yeah I'm not sure it would help.
Yeah, for me, it was like I have to use it more to really give it an honest opinion. I was just curious if you'd tried it or what that experience was like, because I know one of the ones that I used it for was I forget. I think I was basically setting up a config struct for connecting to a Postgres database, and basically the struct at the time, just to make it really explicit, had like the the port and like the host and all the different things you'd use to build basically the connection string. And it was kind of interesting that after you added like one, it essentially knew what the rest of them should be at that point, and they were all pretty accurate. Like it basically set up the struct for me. But at the same time, I agree with you that you still have to go through and check things, and I could especially imagine that if you're using a screen reader, that would even slow it down more, because it's not like you can just glance real quick. You literally have to go line by line and be like, did this give me a good suggestion? And if not, like, how annoying is it going to be to fix this?
Yeah, yeah, and not only that, but all the lines that you're not typing, you don't have them in memory. So you know, I have a huge memory. Normally, I have the entire code base in my head, and I basically know what's going on. So you don't really have a choice because navigating is so brittle. So yeah, I think it would be really difficult to
It's
let it type.
I didn't even think about that. Like, when you're thinking about jumping to code you were just at, do you remember line numbers? Is that kind of what sticks in your head?
Yeah, mostly. Well, yeah, mostly, and not exactly always. But yeah, that's where the line above and line below preview is very
Hmm.
helpful. So, but yeah, you always have to have a mental representation of at least the file that you're in. So otherwise, you
Yeah,
cannot
like I'm
follow.
thinking about myself, and like I would be like, oh, that function I need is up there, or something like that. But I wouldn't, like, I currently don't think about line numbers, probably because I don't have to. But I could imagine in your case, like you're saying, like that would probably be something that would start to stick, and that would also make you, like, the way you map the code in your head would be very different. I feel like you would be
Yeah.
keeping a
So
lot more
how
of
do
it.
you return to a function? Let's say you are in a function X and you want to return to the main function.
Um,
Function X is below.
it kind of depends. Like if I can see it, then sometimes I'll, you can hit, like, I think it's Control G. I don't remember shortcuts until I actually use them. But basically to jump to a line number if you see it. But
Yeah.
even then, like jumping to a line number, I wouldn't know it on the top of my head. Like I wouldn't even know what line number I'm currently on. I would have to like look at the editor see the line number and be like, okay, that's the line I want to go to, and type it. There's also a shortcut to like search through a file for like functions, if that makes sense. I think
Yeah,
it's
the symbol. Yeah.
like, I don't know if it's
Control
R,
Shift P.
B. Oh god, I'm terrible with shortcuts until I like
Okay.
get in the editor and use them. Um, I think everybody's probably like that in a lot of ways, where like I literally have to sit down and start typing it before it like clicks back in my head. But
Yeah.
yeah, like so like I'll use things like that sometimes to jump to like if I know it's a function definition that I'm trying to get to. It really just depends. And then there's definitely times where I just use the mouse and scroll, which is not super efficient, but
Okay.
it works.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, my way is mostly I do have a visual representation of how the or how the function are ordered in this file, and yeah, it's crazy, but yeah, normally I try to guess approximately what line number I think, or I use the Control F all the time in the same file, for example. So searching, so that's why having great names for function and not similar name in the same file is extremely helpful as well. I mean, it's a yeah,
That would make me feel like meta programming has got to be something you hate with a passion at this point.
Ruby,
I mean,
yeah,
don't get me wrong. It's cool when you're doing it sometimes, but I've definitely sat there at Ruby code and like basically under my breath cursing the guy who wrote the code because I'm like, where is this function defined? And like you search the string for it and like
oh yeah,
nothing, and you're like, okay, it's meta programming, but like sometimes it feels like there's meta programming. It's creating more meta programming, and you're like, you can't even find a remote like any string remotely close to this function name.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I tried lots of time to jump in Rails actually in the last, but yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, to say the least.
It's interesting. I used Ruby and Ruby on Rails a lot before Go, and it's one of those things where I don't regret it, and it was really cool to do some of the stuff and to see what was possible. But I definitely would not want to write a bunch of code like that again, especially for a large enterprise service or something like that, because it while it was cool, it's hard to maintain once it gets to a certain size for sure. Like you basically have to understand the code inside and out, and once that person leaves, good
Yeah,
luck maintaining that code.
and when you try to upgrade version as well, this is interesting. Yeah, I also prefer the bottom up way of building web application. So starting with nothing and just going from there.
It's I think there's like it's I guess the way I would describe it is that to me it depends on what people are doing. Like if you're somebody who wants to build 10 applications real quick, sometimes having some sort of scaffolding or something to build off of
Mhm.
is nice. But if you are a company building something really complex from the ground up and it's going to take, it's going to be a several year project or something, I'm like, you absolutely should decide what's best for you and build that, because a little bit of effort now is going to go a long way down the road.
Oh
But
yeah,
I mean, that's also one of the reasons that I switched off of Rails was when you try to customize something that isn't really what Rails wants you to do, all of a sudden you're like, you're fighting the system, and it's like, that's not what you want to be doing.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, I am gonna hop off of here, but thank you very much for joining us. We will definitely we're definitely open to having you on again sometime. So if there's some topic you'd like to talk about or anything like that, just let me know.
Sure,
Hopefully we'll
nice.
have more panelists as well next time, not over the holidays. But I do appreciate you doing this on last minute. That helped us a lot to make sure we had an episode for this week.
Yeah, thanks to you, really.
I think we have a bunch of episodes coming up. Um, at least two, maybe three episodes are being recorded during GopherCon. So I think that's another reason why people are kind of busy is with GopherCon coming up and all of that.
Yeah,
It's going to be interesting. I'm supposed to do they do like a Family Feud version episode that they're doing, and that'll be interesting
nice.
to see how people answered these surveys. But thank you again for joining me.
All right, thank you.
Bye.